1977 was a year which was hallmarked by many striking images, scenes of great pageantry contrasted with tension. Political hope was set against social turmoil. There was fresh optimism that long-running problems could at last be solved. Man-made disasters were matched by great advances in technology. And achievements in sport and adventure. It was a year of contrasting memories which have been preserved here in this series for all time.
I, Jimmy Carter, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute
the
office of President of the United States and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
As 1977 began, the hopes of the free world rested with a new President of the United States, James Earl Carter. He promised a new charter of human rights.
No member can avoid its responsibilities to review and to speak when torture or unwarranted deprivation occurs in any part of the world. The basic thrust of human affairs points toward a more universal demand for fundamental human rights. The United States has a historical birthright to be associated with this process. We in the United States accept this responsibility in the fullest and the most constructive sense. Ours is a commitment and not just a political posture.
That year of new beginnings also saw the American continent suffer the worst winter for many years. Appalling conditions, extreme cold, biting winds across the United States and Canada. Even the awesome power of Niagara Falls was frozen in part, and across the country, stocks of oil and heating fuel ran low. Jimmy Carter had a timely message to a country used to cheap petrol and big, wasteful cars. He wanted a more careful America, and he introduced the idea of saving fuel today for the generations of tomorrow.
I want to discuss one of the most controversial and most misunderstood parts of the energy proposal, a standby tax on automobile gasoline. Gasoline consumption represents half of our total oil usage. We simply must save gasoline.
He toured oil rigs and installations, pushing his message on safeguarding the Earth's precious resources. He was also aware of just how dependent America was on other people's oil. Carter's honeymoon came to an abrupt halt when his budget manager, Bert Lance, was questioned about his financial habits. Lance, according to Carter, was a man of complete integrity.
Bert Lance is my friend. I know him personally as well as if he was my own brother. I know him without any doubt in my mind or heart to be a good and an honorable man.
President Carter flew to London for the World Economic Summit. He hoped the other leaders of the free world would back his call for a new charter on human rights. With Britain's Jim Callaghan, and then on a tour of the Northeast, his personal style was a great success. leaders of the West faced many problems that year. They had to show that they were united against terrorism and against the monetary inflation that threatened them all. Ministers from Europe joined the search for a common purpose, a united front for the free world. Margaret Thatcher was on tour as well, to China, which in 1977 was just opening its doors to the West. Her reception in Peking was warm. In the shadow of Chairman Mao, she made an appeal for more cooperation.
Because it's one of the largest countries, some 800 million people, and I think anyone who aspires to be the leader of a nation must make the opportunity to talk to leaders of other nations.
Over dinner with China's leaders, she made friendships that would endure until her own time as leader. In Japan, she toured factories and saw the progress of the world's fastest growing economy. She visited the United States too, and got a first-hand account of progress on space exploration and the new space shuttle.
It tells you exactly. Of course, on the moon, really to get back from where you were, all you need to do is follow your tracks because nobody else is.
Oh, I see. Yes. And when you've gone 15.
We'll be doing things in space. Kind of stagger your imagination. What we hope to do with this is get the cost down. One of the keys to
The royal yacht Britannia took the Queen on a tour, first to Samoa, then on to New Zealand, and finally Australia. Prince Charles was in North America. Amid great celebration, he opened the Calgary Stampede. His younger brother clearly enjoyed the cavalcade. Across the border, all the American traditions were laid on. Even a Hollywood premiere with stars Farrah Fawcett and her husband Lee Majors, the $6 Million Man. Visitors to Britain that summer soon found out that the big event was the Silver Jubilee. 25 years on the throne for the Queen and Prince Philip. The nation rejoiced. Whole streets came together for a party. The City of London put on the sort of show it does best. All the pomp and ceremony. Pomp and ceremony due to the sovereign from her capital city. Commonwealth leaders came together for a Thanksgiving service in St. Paul's. The nation watched as the royal family and the heads of the nation she was sovereign over came together. But in that summer, riots in London too, between supporters of the right-wing National Front and left-wingers who wanted their marches to be banned. Trouble also in Northern Ireland. The daily battle against the terrorists exploded in street violence. The peace women were honoured with the Nobel Prize. Mairead Corrigan learned of her award and spoke of the plight of her country.
Who has got the prize? Well, I'm absolutely delighted. I really am quite stunned. I don't know what to say. I just say that I accept the prize on behalf of people throughout the world who long for peace. And particularly I accept the prize on behalf of people who are involved in the struggle of non-violence for peace and justice in our whole world.
In Holland, more terrorism. A group of armed men who represented the tiny Dutch colony of South Molucca held up a passenger train. They also took over a nearby school, and 100 children were taken hostage. The children were released after 2 days, but for the 54 passengers in the train, it was 3 weeks before Dutch soldiers moved in and shot the terrorists dead. An audacious kidnapping in West Germany. The Baader-Meinhof gang took the rich industrialist Hans-Martin Schleyer prisoner. They demanded a ransom of $15 million and the release of their colleagues. They produced a video proving he was alive.
Letztlich sitze ich ja hier in Partisanen-Terroristenhaft seit über 5 Wochen, weil ich mich für diesen Staat und seine freiheitlich-demokratische Ordnung in der Öffentlichkeit jahrelang eingesetzt und exponiert habe.
But when the government refused to give them what they wanted, they brutally murdered Herr Schleyer. Later, the same group hijacked a German plane and took it to the Gulf and then on to Mogadishu. The West Germans gave the hijackers food and supplies, but eventually sent in commandos to storm the plane. The hostages were freed after a 5-day ordeal. And on hearing the news, 3 of the imprisoned Baader-Meinhof gang killed themselves in their cells. Their funerals attracted tears and violence. In Spain, the funeral of a policeman killed in the furious war between Basque separatists and the Madrid government. Murdered in his car, the policeman symbolized the problems for Spain as it emerged from Franco's long dictatorship. King Juan Carlos walked a tightrope. His own popularity enabled him to deal with the threats from right and left. He ushered in democracy with Spain's first elections for 40 years. The coalition of center and left-wing politicians under Adolfo Suarez gained a massive majority. And although King Carlos had made the Communist Party legal again, both they and the socialists failed to achieve much support. David Owen, Britain's Foreign Secretary, invited Suarez to London. The Berlin Wall continued to be a symbol for more than the partition of Germany. Nowhere was the Cold War more actively engaged. troops from the four occupying powers continued their patrols, nervously eyeing each other across the concrete no man's land. President Podgorny of the Soviet Union tried out a new style of headgear while visiting Ethiopia. Back home, Moscow celebrated the 60th anniversary of the Russian Revolution with a big display of military might. On Lenin's tomb was Leonid Brezhnev, who replaced Podgorny as president as well as party secretary. He signed a trade agreement with France, a small crack in the wall between the West and Soviet camps. President Giscard d'Estaing was also moving west, but only to Britain, for the seemingly endless round of Entente cordiale.
There you are. Good. And in the sound. Yes, in the sound. I don't know whether he has sound or not. He probably has.
Across the globe, Japan continued its industrial buildup, dominating industries like shipbuilding and cars. But even its drive for efficiency could cause problems, as with these riots against a new Tokyo airport. Israel's Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin stepped down after a financial scandal. His Labour Party successor, Shimon Peres, looked certain to win, but the right-wing Likud party upset all calculations. Menachem Begin, an ardent Zionist, took over and spoke of the occupied territories in a new way.
Territories of the Jewish land, there is a perfect right for a Jew to settle.
He authorized new settlements on the West Bank in a move which alarmed the Arabs and the Americans. Those Israelis who moved to the new areas, however, there was no doubt about the rightness of their cause.
When negotiating with anyone on any issue, one should always negotiate from a strong position and not a weak position. I think in having any relations with the Arabs, we have to show them that what is our territory is where we have intend to stay. It's It's not a question here in this area of saying that we are going to negotiate and give them this bit of territory for this bit of peace. This is our country. This is where we've returned to. This is where we're going to stay.
Neither was there any doubt in the mind of Moshe Dayan. A new atmosphere of strength was about in Israel, and the Arabs would be dealing with people who meant business.
We think that even our ally is wrong. And all the Israeli governments, ever since '67, Mrs. Meir and the late Eshkol and Rabin, all of them carried out Israeli settlement being settled there in the occupied territory. We think that this is not illegal, and we are sure that this is not an obstacle for peace. So we have our view about it, even if President Carter or others think differently about it.
Despite this, American support for Israel continued, at least in concrete ways. New F-15 fighters were supplied. And the Israeli army continued to grow. It was by far the most powerful in the Middle East. President Sadat of Egypt chose this time to launch a peace initiative. He visited Israel, the first such visit by an Arab head of state. He addressed the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, and put forward a bold plan for peace.
بسم الله السيد رئيس الكنيست أيها السيدات والسادة.
Peace fever broke out in the White House. Begin and Carter talked.
An exciting thing throughout the world to see you and Sadat sitting on the same couch, being interviewed together and without any disharmony. Yes, I know. Well, we're proud to have you here. You'll be here 2 or 3 days, I hope. Yes, I think so. Very good.
Begin returned Sadat's visit and went to Egypt. The Sadat plan was for the Palestinians now to be included in any Middle East talks. All sides were cautious, but in 1977 there was real hope for a peaceful settlement.
We respect the great Egyptian people as an ancient civilized nation. They have come here to offer peace and to make peace.
In Rhodesia, the war between the guerrillas and the government troops went on. violence spread to the capital, Salisbury. Ian Smith was still in charge and typically cautious.
Won my bet. I said that the Springboks would win.
What's your prediction on this bet?
I'll tell you after it's all over and the results start coming in.
Smith won his elections and faced the world from a stronger position. Both Britain's David Owen and America's Andrew Young wanted black majority rule within a year.
Very serious, well thought out proposals which have been the result of extensive consultations over the last few months, and when they're published I hope people will think that they are fair and reasonable. If people are prepared to approach them in that spirit, then there's no reason why we shouldn't have a negotiated settlement.
I mean, it's reasonable to assume that at some point there will be majority rule in Zimbabwe. It's also reasonable to assume that the entire country will not be destroyed in the process, and at some point or other, people are going to have to sit down and decide on the terms of the continuation of that nation.
Black leaders gathered with British and American help to work out how to ease the transfer of power. Throughout the difficult business of finding a settlement, guerrilla activity in the country increased. The number of whites leaving the country doubled. In neighboring South Africa, black unrest broke out over the death in police custody of the black leader Steve Biko. Many believed he'd been murdered, and the anger over his death led to the government outlawing black organizations and newspapers. Prime Minister Vorster wanted early elections to strengthen his hand over an increasingly volatile situation. Both inside the country and from the international community, there were more calls for an ending of apartheid. In India, Mrs. Gandhi was also under pressure. She went to the electorate confident they would back her, but she was wrong. She was defeated by the opposition of Mr. Desai, whose first act was to launch an investigation into her abuses of power. Her followers took to the streets. The world's worst air crash came in 1977. Two jumbo jets collided on takeoff at Tenerife Airport. "582 people died. There were 62 survivors, badly injured. Amazingly, 15 people escaped unhurt. Sea, disaster on board the Bravo oil rig, owned by Norway. The American troubleshooter Red Adair took a week to tame the blowout, caused by a faulty valve. In Korea, an explosion on board a train devastated the surrounding area. And in New Orleans, heroism and death in a grain elevator that ignited. Rescue teams showed incredible courage. To follow their appalling winter, parts of the United States suffered flash flooding. There were complaints about lack of warning.
Food. We have no food in our house, and we need a place to stay tonight. Our homes are destroyed.
Thousands were homeless, and millions of dollars of damage was done. In California, the summer heat led to bushfires. Thousands of acres of trees were destroyed. By day, the full extent of the damage was visible. In the year President Carter extolled the virtues of energy conservation, solar power came to the White House. And the latest solar car was shown, with the enormous batteries required to drive it.
If we can develop alternative sources of energy of all kinds economically, then it means that our fossil fuels, which are wasting assets, and we'll keep them longer.
Clive Sinclair launched the first mini TV. It was black and white with a 2-inch screen. The biggest scientific news of the year was the successful maiden flight of the shuttle. It flew piggyback on a 747, then at high altitude, separated and proved that it could glide safely back to base.
Chase. This is Houston Control. Takeoff rotation at about 47 seconds after brake release, which was on the hour straight up.
Houston is go for Seth. Have a great flight.
260.
Launch ready. Test one, SUP. Phase 2, clear. Okay, we got a GPC light, lost the sync on 2, pushing over. And a big X on computer number 2. Roger, standby and halt on GPC number 2. Go for mode 203. Roger. Okay, she's flying good. Roger.
Concorde continued her record-breaking success. There were now scheduled flights to the United States. Travel by air was getting cheaper. Laker cut the price of transatlantic flights, much to the fury of the big airlines. The European Airbus broke into America with a major sale to Eastern Airlines. America launched a new bomber, the supersonic swing-wing B-1. And Europe had a new swing-wing fighter, the Tornado, intended for the air forces of NATO and manufactured jointly by Britain, West Germany and Italy. The daredevil pilots of Britain's Red Arrows were in their usual superb form. Tim Severin, in his leather boat Brendan, completed his Atlantic crossing, intended to prove his thesis that America could have been discovered by Irish monks. Niki Lauda received further honours for his bravery in returning to motor racing so soon after his appalling injuries. Later, he took the wheel of a new Ferrari Formula One car to prove he still had his sights firmly set on the World Championship. The London to Brighton Vintage Car Rally set off in slightly more sedate style that year, but the cars were as superb as ever. A new machine was introduced for judging if a tennis ball was inside the line or not. The bane of Wimbledon umpires seemed to have been solved.
In fact, what we've got here is a an electrically conductive tennis ball, which bounces on electrically conductive wires laid alongside the court lines to send signals back to a computer, which the umpire controls, to determine where balls that land close to the court lines in fact have landed, whether they've hit the court line and therefore are in, or have missed the line and are therefore out.
Fashion designers looked back to the 20s that year in their continual search for something new. Rolling Stone Keith Richard was up on a drugs charge. He seemed more concerned about the endless publicity the case caused.
So I'm glad it's over. I'll just get on with what I'm supposed to be doing now instead of worrying about this, you know? It's just an extra hassle that sort of slows everything down. You know?
In America, the king, Elvis Presley, was dead. His adoring fans worshipped at the shrine. Pop star to another generation, Bing Crosby died too. His old friend Bob Hope reminisced about the game they both adored.
He's a wonderful man, and I've had the good fortune of playing with a couple of presidents, but it's a very eerie kind of thing with all the secret servicemen and the security around him. It is a strange, well, I mean, it's hard to keep score the way I do with a guy peeking over your shoulder. And you never know where they are. I hit a ball near a tree, I walked over and the tree moved.
In Britain, autumn brought the ceremony of beating the retreat. Those were some of the memories of the year 1977.